Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Sheila Joy, and I am NASSCO's Executive Director. And I'm extremely honored and proud to share this webinar that our Sewer Structure Rehab Committee has spent tirelessly many hours putting together. So once again, thank you and welcome to this webinar. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes sharing a little bit about NASSCO because I do know we have a few non-NASSCO members on the call. Just want to welcome you especially. NASSCO is a 501c6 trade association. We are headquartered in Frederick, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. We have been around for 47 years, and our true mission is to set industry standards, specifically for the assessment, maintenance, and rehab of underground infrastructure. Our vision is to increase awareness of aging underground infrastructure and not only to build that awareness, but to provide viable and real solutions through education, technical resources, and industry advocacy. When it comes to education, many of you are probably familiar with things like our PACP, Pipeline Assessment Certification Program. We also, something that's probably more of interest to you would be our Manhole Assessment Certification Program and the ITCP Inspector Program for Manhole Rehab. So these are just some of our educational opportunities. We also have many technical resources that our committees develop, including specifications, webinars such as this one, videos, and many other publications and resources that are open to all. You don't have to be a NASSCO member. You're always free to download anything you need from our website. We're also very much involved in advocacy, specifically working with Washington, D.C. to help spread the need to fund underground infrastructure when those dollars are being allocated. We are a true representation of our industry. We were founded to represent contractors, but over the years we have grown to really mirror and kind of shadow our industry as a whole. So we still have a nice percentage, 36% of contractor companies that are part of NASSCO. But we also have 20% consulting engineers and public agencies who contribute their voices and talents to our organization to help us really lift the tide for all. The rest of the organization is consisted of suppliers and manufacturers of equipment and materials, and then associates such as institutions of higher learning. So if you're not a NASSCO member, I encourage you to learn more. We would love to have you be part of our group. And only through our collaboration, such as this webinar, can we really help each other to succeed in our industry. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We will be giving credits for both days. It will be 2 PDH or 0.2 CEU credits, but you really need to attend today and tomorrow. Tomorrow's is also at 2 o'clock. So if you haven't registered for tomorrow's, please do so. You will also reserve, we had more than 800 people register, so a Q&A at the end we felt would not do you all service, but you will be getting a survey tomorrow afternoon that will give you the opportunity to provide any and all questions you might have for our moderator and our panelists, and we will come together and get back to you within the next couple of weeks. And then finally, this webinar will be recorded. It will be available on NASSCO.org. So if you have others that might be interested in the topics, we encourage you at that point to go ahead and share. But for now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Don Rigby. Don is the Director of Marketing and Education for Madewell Products Corp. And with a 40-year marketing career in media, engineering, and underground technologies, Don's role as Director of Marketing and Education at Madewell includes planning and execution of education initiatives with specifying engineers, utility contractors, and municipal stakeholders. Member, author, and frequent speaker at NASSCO, NASTT, and WEF associations, Don's trenchless expertise includes the control of groundwater infiltration for the preservation and protection of below-grade infrastructure. Don is the immediate past president of NASSCO's Manhole Rehabilitation Committee, and he's also extremely passionate about this topic and our industry. So please join me this afternoon in welcoming Don Rigby.
Well, thank you, Sheila. I not always get described as passionate, but I am kind of a NASSCO nut. I just really appreciate what the organization stands for, how it gets things done, and the value of its accomplishments. Manhole Rehab is a team sport, was originally a live 4-hour NASSCO short course conducted at UCT Nashville in 2021. Many of the subject matter experts had already worked as a team to serve the city of Brentwood, Tennessee. As chair of the Manhole Rehab Committee and in the spirit of education, I couldn't resist the opportunity to tell this story, this real world story with real people. So to tell this story with accuracy, directly with the various, Manhole Rehab Committee was appropriately renamed as Sewer Structure Rehabilitation Committee, and to more accurately support the multiple structures such as wet wells and catch basins in the stormwater systems. So to tell this story with accuracy and directly from the various engineering disciplines required to build a team and win with Manhole Rehab begins with the owner, specifically about conditions he inherited when he first accepted the role, followed by condition assessment, specifying engineer, utility contractor, on-site inspection, and ultimately the owner returning and comparing life before and after a successful rehab project. And to tell this condensed story, we elected to present it in two one-hour presentations today and tomorrow at the same time. In sequential order today includes, we will hear from the owner, then the condition assessment engineer, and then the specifying engineer. That's just half the story, followed by tomorrow's utility contractor, on-site inspection, and owner's beliefs on winning Manhole Rehab program. Before I introduce our asset owner, I'd like to engage first in the very first poll questions, which is an opportunity for us to be interactive with each other. And the first poll question, please present. It takes a moment sometimes for these to appear. First poll question, in your community, who is responsible for initiating manhole rehab projects? Single answer, please, your best answer. Sheila has probably a view of how these are compiling, and this first poll question is a tough one. It may be multiple choices on there. Sheila, do you have any responses to share?
They're still calculating, Don, still getting a few
Okay.
coming in, so we'll just give it another second.
You got it. You got it. We have 3 poll questions planned for each day. They're kind of fun. So, from the looks of poll question number 1, collection system manager seems to have the bird's eye view and the authority to initiate a manhole rehabilitation project. I would tend to agree. That's 41% of the responses. Thank you, folks, for doing this. And we'll keep on doing these for 2 more times this morning, 3 more times tomorrow. Go ahead and close if you would, please. Our first subject matter expert is an engineer for the city of Brentwood, Tennessee. What makes him such a unique resource to the city is his 16 years. He was a consulting engineer in private practice, solving problems for multiple communities. In the last 11 years, he's been dedicated to Brentwood, Tennessee. Please welcome and thank you for being here, Drew Muirhead.
Thank you, Don, for the introduction. As you mentioned, I'm the Assistant Director for the City of Brentwood, Tennessee. It's a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. And I have a kind of a unique background, different perspective as I'm going to bring this as I represent kind of the owner, asset manager, in that prior to coming to Brentwood and our sewer issues, concerns in our rehab program, I was actually with a consulting firm locally and worked on Brentwood sewer rehab program prior to joining the city. So able to kind of bring a different perspective from both sides of the story, and also have been involved with Brentwood sewer rehab program kind of since the beginning back in the mid 2000s. And so the things I'm going to talk about today as I kind of kick off our webinar for the next 2 days is to try and give everybody an oversight before we get into very specific manhole rehabilitation methods that the other presenters will be doing. Some of the things that as a owner we need to consider and look into as a part of this team. One of the main goals I think that everybody's going to be focused on is obviously reduction in I&I issues and ultimately our SSO concerns. So our sanitary sewer overflows. That's something that Brentwood struggled with early on and is continuing to work through and trying to fight those issues. Another part from an owner's perspective is the budgetary constraints. Like anywhere, everything costs money, and part of being in the owner's seat, we have to take a look at the financial obligations to help fund manhole rehabilitation and to plan that out for years to come. Something else that kind of ties in with the budgetary constraints is the regulatory oversight. Like Brentwood and like many other communities across the nation, you maybe try and do some things, but it's just not enough until eventually you got to get flagged by your local regulatory agencies for your SSOs or I&I concerns, and then that kind of kicks you into overdrive, and you're trying to marry your budget financial requirements with regulatory timelines and what they're looking for you to do. And then I'll kind of talk about construction methods and kind of how that was unique with Brentwood as we began our program here with Brentwood and manhole rehabilitation. So just to kind of put things in context for you, so you can maybe relate that to your own community, city, where you're working, kind of give you a little idea of what Brentwood is and how that relates to our program and what we did in starting out our manhole rehabilitation efforts. So it's a population of about 43,000 people. It's mostly residential, affluent community. It's a collection system only. We don't have any treatment. All of our treatment it goes to Nashville Metro, which is kind of unique, and also in the sense that we have to pay gallon per gallon for everything that's pumped to Metro. So it was pretty important for us to, from a financial standpoint, also to be able to reduce our I&I through sewer rehab, but also more importantly, manhole rehabilitation. Some other things to quickly note: 5,600 manholes in our system. You can relate that to your own communities. And then something else that's kind of unique is we have over 3,000 grinder pumps in our sewer system. A lot of that came from years ago. A number of neighborhoods were on septic, and to convert those over to public sewer, it was less intrusive and a little easier to install low pressure grinder pump systems. And how that kind of relates to what we're talking about today and tomorrow, and how we had to take that into consideration through our manhole rehabilitation program is also those can produce high levels of hydrogen sulfide, and as we all know, can attack your concrete substrates and your cast iron castings. So to kind of walk you through Brentwood and kind of what we've had to experience and what I've had to experience as an owner, and kind of what I got into is in the mid to late 90s. Brentwood was doing some rehab efforts. They knew they had some issues. It was all kind of self-imposed. They had purchased some equipment, did some CCTV inspections of pipelines, smoke testing. The main rehab method was clay and concrete joint repairs and ground injections. And what you don't see on this slide is any mention of manhole rehabilitation. It was just didn't occur. They would make repairs as needed to manholes for almost a complete failure or something, but there was no manhole inspection specific and no manhole rehab at that time. So that led us into 2006, which is kind of when the red flags got waved around us. Our I&I issues had kind of reached a point that checking a box off for our rehab internal program wasn't enough. And so unfortunately, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, TDEC, stepped in and we were issued an agreed order. As part of that, we went into a sewer moratorium, which meant no new connections to our collection system. And so as any growing city, especially there in the mid 2000s, that was a major concern. And just to kind of give you a point of reference, we in 2004, what kind of triggered some of this and caught the attention of the regulatory agencies was we had 30 overflow events that were reported and for sanitary sewer overflows. So after we kind of had received the order, the next step for as an owner was to try and come up with a plan of action. And so a CAPER, corrective action plan, engineering reports were created. It was kind of split up into two phases. Obviously, a sewer rehab program was kind of generated. And as part of that program, manhole rehabilitation was an important aspect of that. Each U-tank was also identified in those early studies. And the timeline that was presented to the regulatory agency, TDEC, was to be done with our initial efforts in 2015. Kind of going back to our budget requirements, it was estimated at $30 million at that time. Brentwood, our department was in a good position financially, and so how we handled the budget stuff and kind of how that dictated how we rolled out our construction manhole rehabilitation project was that money was funded through bonds, and so we were not dependent on any outside funding sources. So in 2008, we began kind of our sewer rehab program, if you will, which included manhole rehabilitation. I'm going to kind of walk through some of those steps and some things, some takeaways from that. Again, 2008 to the end of 2014, bringing us to 2015 was our rehab program. I'm going to talk in some more detail here about flow monitoring with I&I analysis and studies, and then also some program management and construction oversight. So one thing I do want to mention is that as we got into our program, we were fortunate enough that the city decided early on and identified creating a GIS department in 2006, kind of as we were getting into our order and our program. And I would imagine today most communities, municipalities, utility districts have a GIS system of some sort and have GPS their assets, particularly as it relates to manhole rehabilitation. This has been a critical component of our program and our managing our manhole rehabilitation projects. Obviously, going out, locating them, finding them, if they're buried, knowing where they are, using old as-builts to kind of determine when they were built, type of materials that they were created from. It's a huge thing. But more importantly, as you jump 10, 15 years later, after you've gone through a manhole rehabilitation program, it's so critical to be able to store all that data that you collect during that process. And one of the things today that we're fortunate of is I can click on a manhole in our GIS system and I can see when it was rehabbed, who rehabbed it, what contractor it was, what products they used, and some additional information. So that's just good as you continue on with your program, as you expand your program, and then maybe as you revisit areas that you've completed in years down the road, being able to map that out and manage all that data. So I just want to briefly mention flow monitoring. While it's not directly manhole rehabilitation related, but it is in my opinion, a key component of rating or showing your success for a manhole rehabilitation project or program. We began flow monitoring with 6 permanent meter sites back in 2006. We still have those in the ground today. That's kind of what I like to say. It gives us a pulse of our system and how it's reacting annually. And also over the years, we've done temporary metering up to 50 sites throughout the city and breaking it down into sub-meter basins. And this has been critical. It's important to have a baseline of what you're trying to achieve, what you're looking to do, whether it's an overall sewer rehab program, but then also manhole rehabilitation projects. Have that baseline, looking at it, look to see how well you've done. If you go in and are you spending your money wisely? Is that manhole project that you did in that basin, did it achieve what you wanted to? And then down the road, 10, 15 years, is that system, those products that you use, are they holding up? So it also helps with regulatory compliance. We were able to use flow monitoring analysis throughout our rehab to be able to get out of a moratorium or I guess a moratorium relief. And so that's another benefit of flow monitoring. So sewer rehab and kind of our construction methods for our project. One of the things was that we kind of went about with the find and fix method, if you will. We actually, with the fact that we were kind of using money in-house, we were able to hire on contractors. We sent them out to sub-basins. They did CCTV inspection, manhole inspections. And then from that, they gave it to our engineers. Our engineers then in return gave those contractors task orders to complete the work so that we can kind of streamline it and get our rehabilitation efforts in a faster method. As it related to manholes, we actually went out to bid and hired a local manhole rehab contractor. We worked with them for a number of years. And as we went into a basin, we found a pipe that needed to be rehabbed. We kind of went with the holistic approach where we would not only just rehab the pipe, we would also do the laterals, but then we would also do the manholes on either side. So that way we left a basin or we left an area, street. We knew that from manhole to manhole, that section of pipe had been completely rehabbed and should serve us for many years down the road. You can see there over 1,600 manholes were rehabilitated throughout the project. So as we kind of neared the end of our initial program, we decided to continue on and basically created a phase 3 program and do some more rehab. We saw the effectiveness that manhole rehab was having on our system. The leaks that we found in our manholes were great, and by reducing that, we were seeing a benefit in our reduction in flows. And so we decided to continue on through 2019 with our rehab program. And at that point, we had spent almost 24 million, and then 20% of our sewer system had been rehabbed. I want to briefly mention too, in 2015, a master plan was done in conjunction with that CAP-ER. And one of the benefits that came out of that I just want to talk about briefly was the hydraulic model. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the flow monitoring. A lot of times you're talking manhole rehab and the money you spent for that. But again, it's also good to acknowledge and look into spending some money on other sources such as flow monitoring and hydraulic model to be able to help you recognize areas that maybe you need to go into and look at rehab and doing some manhole rehab. It also helps with regulatory agencies and showing them your results of all the work that you're doing and the money you're spending as it relates to manhole rehab and then sewer rehab in general. But again, a hydraulic model, we went through this process and it continues to serve as a great tool both during construction, after construction, and as we continue to project and look into future rehab efforts. And so in 2019, we kind of came to the end of our phase 3. And once again, we worked with our regulatory agency, TDEC, and we asked for another extension to continue to work at our I&I removal. We had some great results, and I'll touch on the results of everything at the end of tomorrow's program. But it was successful, so we decided to continue on with rehab and through 2022. Part of that and what was in the initial plan was to build an EQ tank, and that is online as of December of 2022. But more importantly, and as it relates to this webinar, our sewer rehabilitation program is planned to continue through 2027, which we will allocate through continued funding. But more importantly, here to date, what we're working on is we've just finished a number of smoke testing. We've kind of gone back into smoke testing through manholes, but then also we just finished a 200+ manhole inspection with an outside contractor along our main trunk line that runs along the river. And our engineers are currently looking into that, collecting that data, going through it, and we plan to put out a pretty significant project for manhole rehabilitation here in the next year. So kind of in summary, as an owner in controlling our assets and manhole rehabilitation, some things that, budget concerns always come into play. We'll talk about inspections and providing that oversight during construction, manhole rehab, and how important that is, and to being able to budget for that and fund those services. Obviously, regulatory guidance and enforcement is an important component of from an owner having to work through their timelines and their guidance and regulations that they want to see from a manhole rehab or sewer rehab program. GIS asset management is a critical component for particularly manhole rehab, in my opinion, and being able to manage that. You can get inundated very quickly as you get into a project or program with manholes and what you've done, what you haven't done, who did it and when they did it and all that. So again, a critical component and worth taking the time to get that right on the front end. Flow monitoring, again, in my opinion, it's a great tool to be able to identify areas to spend your money that you might get your best bang for your buck in manhole rehab, and then also being able to show those results that what you're doing is working, and maybe it's not. Maybe you need to reassess your efforts and your methods. Obviously, construction methods that'll come into play with some of the other presentations. But then again, the main goal I think for everybody here on today's webinar is I think we're kind of all in it to see the reduction of I&I and ultimately elimination of sanitary sewer overflows for our communities, municipalities, and utility districts throughout the nation.
Drew, thank you. To hear the rest of Drew's story, please join us tomorrow. And before we move on to our next engineer on condition assessment, the next poll question is a simple true, false answer. The question is, level 1 condition assessment does not require man entry into the structure and can be conducted from the service opening. True or false? Level 1 condition assessment does not require man entry into the structure and can be conducted from the service opening. These questions are always interesting to me. And it looks like we got a response coming. Yes. It appears the majority of you know a bit about the condition assessment on manholes. The answer is true. Level 1 assessment can and is conducted with a top-down view from the surface. Thank you. If experience matters, Jim Harris matters a great deal. He's almost as old as I am and has dedicated his professional life to the sewer industry and is hands-on active with NASSCO and BAMI committees. Thanks for being here, Jim Harris. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Don. Thank you a lot. My topic today involves how do you actually do a condition assessment of a sanitary sewer manhole. And I want to point out, first of all, every manhole is unique. It has been my experience over the years that many utilities and engineers and so forth kind of tend to think manhole inspection is pretty simple. It can be done by a less qualified people, less trained people and so forth, and the CCTV pipe inspections. And I want to convince you that both are important and that manholes in particular, as we say here, are unique and they are actually rather complicated. So what makes a manhole unique? Well, think about it. You have a hole there that you want to allow people to come into and inspect the manhole and do maintenance into the sewers and so forth, but you also want to keep people out. You want to be able to allow cameras and cleaning equipment and so forth to get in there, but you want to keep runoff out of the manhole. You have a vertical situation. We're going to talk later about the manhole being considered a vertical pipe that starts at the surface, so it gets runoff coming into it from inflow, from rainfall and so forth directly. But it also, if it gets deep enough, it gets below the groundwater table and you've got infiltration coming in. It's also subject to hydrosulfide corrosion. So it is a lot of things it needs to be able to maintain itself through, but also be able to allow. So it is a very unique structure. Don mentioned that I was actually on the board of directors of the Barrett Asset Management Institute. Some of you know Tom Isley and his group. And that group is really dedicated to the asset management side of things. So I have that hat I frequently put on. And BAMI developed, I don't know if BAMI actually developed these, but I know they use these questions. There are 8 basic questions of asset management that are going to be associated with manhole condition assessment. The first 3 questions answer these. What do we have? And don't necessarily think that you know what you have. I've seen many, many times that a utility is surprised when a complete condition assessment is done of how many manholes they actually do have in their system. And then where are these manholes located? You're going to get that information also from condition assessment. And maybe more pertinent to today's discussion, we're going to find out what the condition of each manhole is. You're going to be able to determine through a level 1 or a level 2 inspection what the condition of the manhole is. So condition assessment gets you those first 3 questions answered, but you still have some more information than you can glean once you have done a condition assessment and you've located the manholes and you've identified where all of them are. Well, from the condition assessment, you can determine what is the manhole worth, based upon its original construction, based upon what type of construction, how long it's been in the ground, how much useful life it has, and what its condition is. Then you can determine what action is required, what needs to be done, perhaps maintenance, perhaps a rehabilitation, perhaps a replacement, but you can determine what action is required for each of those manholes that you've inspected. Then you can, through risk management, you can establish a priority, and that priority and your budget will establish when is the action going to be required. We're going to talk about how we set some policy for doing that. And then what's it going to cost to get that manhole back in the condition that you want to maintain that manhole in? And then finally, the question is, you can determine once you know your cost and your action plan and so forth, how it's going to be funded and what funding forces to look for. We've already hinted at this, but there are two basic types of manhole inspection. This was in the poll question. As most of you understood, a level 1 inspection is what people my age, the old timers, used to call an above ground physical inspection. You'd get above the ground, you'd have a pad, you'd maybe make a few measurements, you'd look into that manhole and you determine, is the frame in good condition or not? Is the frame seal leaking? Is the chimney in good condition, the cone and the wall and so forth? And you do all of that from above ground. And you can get quite a few of these done in a day, maybe 40 or 50. Now, contrasting with that is the below ground physical inspection, or what MACP calls a level 2 inspection, where you're going to either with a human, with proper safety equipment, as you see here, being descended in the manhole to make measurements and to visually look at every aspect of that manhole. Or you can use, now we have specialized cameras that can go into the manhole, and you can do this even still from above ground, but with the camera going into the manhole itself. With this, you can get 8 to 10 manholes done per day. Wanted to show this real briefly, what the MACP inspection forms look like. On the right here, you have a header form where you get demographic data, who you are, where you are, what you're doing, why you're there, what the manhole is, what the materials are, and so forth about that manhole for a level 1 or 2 inspection. Then you move to the manhole inspection form. That's the large form to your left, where you actually look at each component separately, and depending upon whether it's a level 1 or level 2, you gather quite a bit of information. And then for a level 2, you, over here to the bottom right, you would actually complete a manhole inspection form, looking at the manhole as it is a vertical pipe. And if those of you that are familiar with the PACP, this form is almost identical to the PACP form. But the main point I wanted to make in showing you this is, if you look at that form on the left, all of the red there that's not circled, and even some of it that is circled with the blue circles, is what is required for a level 2 inspection. A level 1 inspection really only records the information that is in the blue circles. So you've got the choice there of a level 1 or level 2, or a modified level 1 or 2. And many utilities will opt for either a modified level 1 with added requirements, or a modified level 2 with reduced requirements. These pictures kind of illustrate the point you're looking for in a level 1 manhole inspection. Every angle, joint, or change of material should be a point of particular emphasis or interest, and these are what is done in a level 1. You look specifically at the cover, and where the cover meets the frame at the bearing surface, is that seated well? So you'll make a yes, no decision. And then you'll look at the frame seal between the frame and the chimney. And is that leaking or not? Anytime there's a change of material, like you do have frequently between the frame and the chimney, you might have a metal frame and a brick chimney, that's a point where it's very difficult to seal, and is likely for I&I to come in. Also, where there are angles, like where the chimney branches out into the cone, into the wall, that's where it is. And then where pipes come into the wall are also a point of particular interest. Now, for a level 2, you do get into a lot more detail. We're going to treat in a level 2 manhole inspection, at least in the MACP method, the manhole is going to be considered a vertical pipe, but with various components. So we're going to start at the rim and measure down to where the defects are. And then we're going to look at the outgoing pipe being at 6 o'clock, and we're going to look at the clock position to locate where defects are in the manhole wall. So you could say a manhole has a crack in the wall, 10 foot below the rim at 5 o'clock. That would be very near the outgoing pipe of 6 o'clock. Here's another view of the invert of a manhole. And like I said, we're going to look at the outgoing pipe and arbitrarily call that 6 o'clock, regardless of where it is in your view of the manhole. In this case, the 6 o'clock is at the top of the manhole and the 12 o'clock is at the bottom. And then you see 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock. But we in the MACP, and it could have been done various ways, very arbitrarily established that the outgoing pipe is the 6 o'clock position. And then you move around that in a clockwise way to determine where the clock positions in the manhole are. So you have the chimney exterior, the chimney interior, the cone exterior, the cone interior, the wall exterior and the wall interior, because of course they can be above ground. And then you have the bench and the channel. These pictures illustrate kind of what we're doing there with that previous couple of diagrams. The one on the left indicates that there's missing brick. So you're going to locate that missing brick, in this case, 0.5 feet below the rim. You're going to record it just like you would in a PACP inspection. And those bricks are missing from the 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock clock positions with reference to the outgoing pipe at 6 o'clock. The image on the left illustrates that you can also need to look at, if a manhole's above grade, the outside of the manhole. In this case, we have a continuous defect of a multiple fracture, a fracture multiple FM, running from 0.5 feet to 2.1 feet below the rim from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock with reference to the outgoing pipe at 6. Here we have two on the inside of a manhole to illustrate that manholes, like pipes, can have fractures. In this case, this fracture is at 12 o'clock, so the outgoing pipe is behind you, and it runs from 13.3 feet to 18 feet, and then you have a root ball in a manhole. Just to show that the same things are occurring in a manhole or in a pipe, and we're recording the information in much the same way. Then we want to establish the risk. The risk is going to be the formula likelihood of failure times the consequence of failure. We establish the likelihood of failure by giving a number, a 1 through 5 numerical rating to every defect we see in that manhole, with 1 being a very minor defect, say a few roots coming in, to 5 being, the walls are collapsing in the manhole. And then we also, how bad is it going to be if that manhole fails? And we establish a consequence of failure. NASSCO recommends that we use the triple bottom line approach, where we don't just look at the dollars of cost into a manhole, but also what are the social costs, what are the environmental costs, and we combine that together to also get a 1 through 5 rating. And as we do that and multiply those two together, you could have a rating for that manhole between 0, if there are no problems, all the way up to 25 if you have a likelihood of failure of 5, a collapsing manhole that's in the middle of a busy street or something like that. So that's how you establish the risk that is used to establish priorities. And then as far as decision making, if you'd advance the slide again, Sheila, to get a yes, we need to establish policy based upon what we estimate the remaining useful life of a manhole to be and the likelihood of failure score. So in this case, we see a 100-year, say, manhole here that is deteriorating over 20, 30, 60, 75, 80 years and so forth to get down to the end of that life of the manhole. In this case, a utility has established a policy at about 50 years. They estimate that manhole is going to be at a likelihood of failure score of 2, or moving into the 3 category. That is when you do the rehabilitation. And you'd love to do this at this stage before you actually start getting these manhole inspections done. So you've already made your decision through policy, and you've codified it when you're going to be doing various rehabilitations. And then as Drew pointed out, the value of GIS. Through this process, you can get all sorts of information. These tables represent each of those kind of information that you can get. And you're going to be able to establish that into a map. And you can look at the map to see the relation of these rehabs to each other, how they relate to the pipes. You might want to, for example, if you're doing a pipe, and Drew made this point, you're going to want to rehabilitate the manholes too, maybe even if they're not quite ready for rehabilitation yet, just because you're out there and you want them to be fixed as well as the pipes are fixed. And you have the map that you can use now to locate these and reference these, instead of in the old days having to go to a shelf and pull hard copies off and look for your problems and unroll maps. So in summary, manholes are unique structures that require significant assessment skills. Level 1 inspections can be used when only basic information is needed. Level 2 inspections are needed when more precise details and locations are needed. This is typically when a rehabilitation may be driving the process or modeling is driving the process. You may need better location information, better depth and capacity information regarding the manholes. So you need better measurements that a level 2 gives. The database priorities should be used to establish and codify policy rather than political decisions and so forth being used to do that. And then all deliverables should include a link to a GIS map. Thank you very much.
Well done, Jim Harris. Well done. Obviously, you know your craft, and thanks for sharing. Before advancing to our next expert engineer, poll question number 3 is next. And I'll let you, there we go. Poll question reads as follows. When planning a manhole rehab project and developing a specification, do you have your own, use one from an engineer, use the NASSCO specification, or let the contractor wing it? When planning a manhole rehab project and developing a specification, do you have your own, use one from an engineer, use the NASSCO specification, or let the contractor wing it? Ideally 30 seconds. And as you can share, please do. I was hoping not many, number 4 wouldn't get many votes, and it appears that's the case. Using the NASSCO spec, thank you very much. Awesome. That's a great answer. I didn't know how it was going to come about, but you did good. Thank you very much. To finalize today's presentation from the perspective of a specifying engineer, I'm pleased to introduce a lady I've known for a few years. She was my co-chair with me on the Manhole Rehab Committee for a couple of years. She's a task master, meaning providing leadership on the Sewer Structure Rehabilitation Committee today. And you can see from her bullet points, both Carol and RJN are well experienced and well known for underground infrastructure restoration. Please welcome Carol Giokas. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Don. Thanks, everybody. I am going to be talking about specifications in the Manhole Rehab program. And Drew talked about the owner's challenge of juggling priorities. Do all these, Jim talked about inspections and find all sorts of cool stuff. And here I am, the last presentation of the day, and I'm hopefully not going to put you all to sleep, but it's not like a super exciting topic. But good specs are critical to the success of your rehab program. So there's some things you need to establish up front. When are you going to do it? There's a lot of things to consider. You know, what's your fiscal year, weather, school schedules, a lot of those types of things. Who's going to do the work? A lot of places have capability to self-perform some of the manhole rehabilitation work, or are you going to contract everything out? Are you going to do, where are you going to do the rehab? Are you going to do rehab by proximity or location, do one basin at a time, or by type? We're going to do all our frame chimney cover rehabilitation together, or we're going to do all lining or whatever. And then how much? Drew mentioned this, you know, that is what constrains the program. How much money is there? Is it going to be multiple programs? What's going to go first? How are you going to get all that work done? So Jim talked about inspections, and those inspection findings are really important to driving a rehab program. You look at those inspection findings and available technologies and approaches that are out there. Those are always changing, always updating. Those get married into your rehab recommendations, and that goes through the budget funnel, and that creates your rehab program. Specs are how that program gets communicated to the contractor. So there's a lot of parts to your spec book. The front end, there's a bid package, contract docs, general conditions. I'm not going to talk about any of those today because we don't have time. We don't want to be here forever. We're going to talk specifically about the specifications, and in particular, the technical specifications part of the spec book. So the technical specifications are where it's defined what is to be done at each location, and what are the instructions to be performed, like what are the details of what is to be done. How are you going to measure what gets done, and then how are you going to pay for it? And then also, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but what items are not paid for or are included with other items. And on the right there, that's a bid tab that you should have a paragraph. Every one of those numbered items on your bid tab needs to correspond to a numbered item in your technical spec. So as Jim mentioned, much of the information when you're doing an inspection comes from the inspection, location code, surface types, structure depth, wall material, all of that comes from an MACP inspection of a manhole. Some things do not come from the inspection, some things come from your GIS. And one of those things that is very important when putting together a manhole inspection rehab or a manhole rehabilitation program is floodplain status, because that can drive the type of cover that you're going to put on a structure. So you end up putting together a spreadsheet that lists the structure ID and what you're going to do at each one of those structures. And again, I'm on the GIS bandwagon as well. Using maps, you can see on this map, this shows floodplains. You want to be able to show what needs to be done where. So the types of repairs that you might specify, there's sort of, I guess, 3 different types. There's like upper manhole repairs, which involve really just the cover, the frame, the chimney part of the manhole. Most of these are not trenchless. They do involve digging. A few do are trenchless. And for those, if I go down this list, you'll see internal chimney seal at the bottom. External chimney seal, I'll talk about when we get to incidental. And then lower manhole repairs, which is basically from the chimney down, various types of leaning for structural or chemical protection. grouting, multiple different types of grouting that you might want to do in the manhole. And then of course, repair or rehabilitation of the bench and trough area. And the other types of manhole repairs, these are sort of less commonly specified, but installing a barrel section. If you have an extra long chimney, you might need to shorten that up and install another 48-inch or 56-inch, whatever your diameter is, barrel section. Partial reconstruction, which is from the cone all the way up. Occasionally, you just have to replace a manhole. You can't rehabilitate it. Cleaning, plugging pipes that shouldn't be in the manhole are also things that could be in your rehab program. So we're going to talk in just some detail about just one of these repairs, the replaced frame and bolted cover for paved and not paved. This is a sample bid item spec. And so in that text, well, first you can see there's items 1, 2, and 3, those reference items in the bid tab. You can reference other items in each specification. So this one says also included in the replace frame and cover bid items is replacement of the adjustment and installation of an external chimney seal. So when we specify a replace frame and cover, that includes the chimney and installation of an external chimney seal. So you want to reference standards. The town that where this work was being done, they have their own bolted cover, bolted frame and cover standards. Those need to be referenced in the spec. And then what do you do with the existing stuff? And then the key thing, method of payment, how is it unit price? Is it lump sum per vertical foot, whatever, and then what is included with that payment? You can see all those things listed out, and I've underlined restoration because that is often for manholes, that is often included. So restoration, what I just mentioned before, that's incidental. You want to be clear about defining what is incidental. And that means it doesn't get a separate pay item. Typically, things like mobilization, traffic control, bypass pumping, and restoration are incidental for manhole rehab projects. These can have a separate bid item if it's an unusual situation, or if you're replacing a lot of pipe, then it'll probably be separate bid item. But for manholes, typically these are all considered incidental. A few other things, and we'll touch more on this tomorrow, but you want to define how thick do coatings need to be? What is it you need to measure? What kind of testing needs to be done? We always include a pre-construction video. You want to know what was there before the contractor came in, and that's really for the owner's protection, the contractor's protection, and the resident's protection. And then maintenance bonds, typically they're a year. You may, in certain circumstances, want an extension. That should be a separate bid item. So basically, good specs communicate what's to be done, where it's to be done, when it's to be done, and how it's to be done. Don, are you talking?
You're exactly right. That's the second time in my life I've done that. Carol, you never disappoint. Thank you. So far, half the story's been told. We'll open with the asset owner tomorrow. No, we open with the asset owner today. We'll close with them tomorrow and complete the team concept with voices from the utility contractor and on-site inspection. Following tomorrow's presentation, you'll be asked to evaluate the value of this webinar to you personally, plus an opportunity to ask specific questions. And give us a couple of weeks, if you would, to respond with a FAQ document from 5 different perspectives. You might find it a very valuable tool. Sheila, if there's no other parting comments, I love to start on time and end on time, and we're a little bit on the late side. We were a couple minutes late, but I think we did good. Subject matter experts, thank you for your cooperation. Participants, thank you for coming back tomorrow. And remember, to get the full credit, CEU PDH credit, you need to attend tomorrow as well. And for now, I'll say so long. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.